Hello, this is Tetro Runner, a post-mortem. Tetro Runner is born of a singular premise, and that is that I want to build mechanics, not content. This was going to be practical for me as a team of one. I think it's important that I don't end up trying to build forests and castles and 30 dragons and have all the grand scope of all of that. It was more reasonable that I focused in on a centric mechanic, a small group of interactions that were interesting for the player and fun to play and hopefully fun for me to design and build. I'm a coder primarily. I try to do a little bit of drawing and a little bit of music, but I don't have a lot of experience with those things. So when I was starting to think about game ideas, it kept coming that it was so obvious that it had to be something that was mechanically intriguing and interesting, that would maintain my interest and would enable me to actually execute the thing, keeping it within a scope that was reasonable for one person. I started thinking about platformers and platformers being constructed of lots of little platforms, and maybe the player can just be placing those platforms themselves. Is it reasonable to have a cognitive load where you need the player controlling the player and the platforms? And I tossed and turned and thought a lot about it. Tetris came to mind as one of the quintessential building block placement games. There's a lot of good core joy to be found in a game as simple as Tetris. It's satisfying to place the blocks. It feels good. What if the player was running along those blocks and they were coming in from the side and maybe progressing in some way like that? It sent me down the rabbit hole of arcade games. Arcade games are special. They make a simple promise and generally they keep it. An arcade game promises that for a nickel and a dime, you roll up to the machine and grab a joystick, pop a coin in, and you have fun. You experience potentially a unique and interesting mechanic. You have visuals and sound that are loud and over the top, and it's stimulating, and it's a couple of hours, and then it's done. And it delivers on this small promise that it made. Your investment was not huge. Your return was reasonable for it. It's just honest, pure game design. We have a single mechanic. How do we flesh this out to the value of a couple of dollars? It really is a pure format of the art. And I think that the modern games industry obviously has these incredible, sprawling, epic titles with hundreds of hours of gameplay and game passes and et cetera, et cetera. And I think somewhere in there is lost maybe the pursuit of investigating these simple, interesting interactions and presenting them and then moving on to something else. And that's really what I wanted to do. To me, the idea of building the level with blocks and maybe having the player run along and you're doing a little bit of a juggling game, like an old school skill testing game, this all sounded very cool. This all sounded very fun, but is it? Roll the clip. Looking back on this early build makes me smile. What a journey. The player controller feels really bad. Like really bad. It's sluggish, it's clunky, it's this weird cadence to it. It's really rough. Placing the blocks and line clearing feels good, as it always has. And the act of placing the blocks and then running onto them, that being the... so clunky. That being the... I could rotate as well. That being the primary focus here, definitely even at this early stage, just feels good. There's some rightness about it. Look at this. Onto prototype and maybe a little bit past prototype. This is a menu. If we click run, ooh. Loading screen, so I'm talking about. Oh yeah. Now we have some action of some sort. This was an experimental phase in the middle where I thought maybe having the player move, oh goodness, Having the player move incrementally. Oh, restart? Can we restart? Oh yeah, we can. We got menus. Having the player move incrementally on block spaces like that. I thought maybe that was good to help try to tie in the Tetris aspect a little bit. Mechanically on paper, maybe that seemed clever to me at the time. It's awful to play. It's so bad. It takes away the player freedom. The idea was by discretizing the movement, I would split the cognitive load aspect up. Because where your player is going to move becomes 100% deterministic, I was hoping that would reduce the cognitive load of moving the player to make it easier to balance moving the player and moving the tiles. All it does is make it unfun and feel very odd. Yeah, very, very keen to move on from this build. I remember this one because of the tutorial. So I added the tutorial because players were struggling to come to grips with how to play the game, as it is mechanically a little unique, which at this point is being kind. We have a tutorial. Welcome to Tetramino Runner. A lefty, right, space jump. Now we have a little tutorial sequence. You may be surprised how far you can jump with a little space ND. The tutorial continues like this. We shan't need to run through the whole of it. Needless to say, at this point, I was focusing on, I can't get out. I was focusing on the wrong stuff at this stage. I had identified players were struggling to play the game, and I thought, I need to make tutorials and make the game easier to play and whatnot. What I actually needed to do was refine what was there a little bit, because the prototype's job was to prove that the concept was fun. The prototype's job was not to test do players who don't know where your project is going, don't know what your project will become, they don't know the future content, they don't have any context at all for what's going on. The prototype is not there to test whether they are good at the game or not, which is kind of what I was using it for, unfortunately. The prototype is there to prove to me that I thought the idea was fun and that it was worth pursuing. And I needed to develop it a little bit more before I put it in front of people, because they didn't have the extra imagination I had as to where the project was going. So I spent all this time making this tutorial that if I don't even, here we go. We can move on from the tutorial and it goes places. Waste of time, retrospectively. Did it too early. Yes, it was fun, but where exactly was the fun? I needed to find it. I needed to find the fun. So obviously, beating previous scores, very fun. Competing with friends, great. The platforming, we know that platforming's fun. We have enough evidence at that point. There were all these elements of the game that were very clearly fun. How could I use these to make a framework so that I could keep myself in check as we went along? Trying to add new mechanics, trying to add new things to the game. How do I know that those things are hitting the correct pleasure centers? Well, from this expansive list came these core tenets. Run. Tetro Runner demands that you do not stop running. The corruption does not stop chasing. Experience tight, physics-based platforming designed with fun in mind. Tetro Runner rewards skill and risk. Build. There is a little in the environment to help make your way forward, but for any success, you will need to build. Blocks enter from the right. Use them to build a path forward, combining them correctly for score explosions. Score. This is an arcade score attack. Skill expression is a pillar of Tetro's design. Experiment and practice to discover hidden methods for maximizing the score in each run. And survive. Pressure is constant. A wall of corrupted binary chases from the left, devouring everything in its path. Leaving blocks behind will increase the corruption's pace. On this good foundation, I hoped to build a house and maybe even a home. Tetro now had pillars that I could use to inform its game design, pillars that I could check new mechanics against. Anything new that I wanted to add, we had to serve either running, building, scoring, or surviving. If it did not serve these purposes, we weren't hitting the right pleasure centers. Roll the next one. This is getting pretty advanced. We've got multiple buttons in the menu. I'm proceeding with my bad habit of trying to add more to the game to make it make sense. Got this idea of doing levels where build additional content, and again, just doing this stuff way too early. Just refine what is there, my man. Border spawners, death walls turning on and off, trying to build some dev tools. That was a really good direction. The game in here starting to kind of take a little bit more. Like this is probably the first build that I would say legitimately feels like you could actually play it. It's smooth, it's snappy. The platforming is a lot more responsive now. The character controller is a lot more usable, and there is a perceivable threat chasing me there from the left. You can see how keen I was on trying to tune things at this point, because I've got all these additional metrics on the screen that I can actually, if I remember some hotkeys, yeah, there we go. I can use these hotkeys to move those values up and down, because I was in a real tuning heavy phase, trying to refine what I had here, but still just looking so rough. This is great. Look at this. Developer mode, toggles, sliders, choose where things start. These early developer tools ended up being so much more useful. They accelerated my ability to iterate and to tune. I'm really happy with what I was doing with these early developer tools. Everything else here is a little bit disappointing. I have this CRT effect on the screen. I was really trying to make the game feel like more than it was at this point, honestly. I'd a little bit more of an environment, animate the player, get some environmental tiles. This is the first instance of environments in Tetro, where maybe there's grey blocks in addition to the coloured blocks. Maybe that helps the feeling that you're in a world and you've got places to go and decisions to make. And ultimately, I just needed to keep chipping away at the core until the core was better. Feels good. It does feel good. Don't get me wrong. With hindsight, I'm able to pick on this, but at the time, I was very happy with this. Score screen. Put my name in. Oh, maybe put my name in. Put on the high scoreboard. Return to menu. The core is close. I can genuinely say that I like this. This is better. We got a little menu. It's ugly, but come on. Ugly, but it's feeling a bit snappier, a bit faster. That camera's been zoomed out a little bit. I've got some identifiers on the screen. Excuse me. Identifiers on the screen in the corner telling me that maybe there's some stuff coming up. We've got shadows. Interesting direction that I went away from and never went back to, because it doesn't really stay true to the arcade thing that I was going for. But all that said, just looking fine. Looking for line clears. We fall, do we die? And look at that. NEP high score. Nice little menu. Some little details starting to come through for us. Little controls screen. Moved away from the tutorials, more trying to lean into gameplay, explaining itself and the player working it out a little bit. Long way to go, but looking much better. This is pretty well the peak before the fall, which I shall explain now. We had a problem. Now I'm not an artist, as I've outlined, so I've put together a class to explain exactly what my misstep had been. So this is a class called Naive Game Dev. You would attach this to a game object in Unity called MyHubris. These headers are really handy. They let you define what a group of variables in the inspector might be for. These specific ones are help to define the lies that I was telling myself. Is two-dimensional. This is a boolean that I had set just hard to true because I believed that 2D must just be a good, simple starting spot. It's one less dimension. I don't have to worry about complicated 3D math. It'll be great. At start time, we're just going to print a simple message to the console saying that we're starting a 2D project and this will be quick. We're going to start a coroutine, just straight roaring start. This coroutine is called the slow descent into madness. We will run in raw update. If it's two-dimensional, we're going to attempt to handle some sorting orders, and we're going to fight with the pixel perfect camera. When our naive optimism gets to 0 or less, we're going to give up and switch to 3D. First of all, though, as we saw previously, naive optimism, starting with a value of 100, we have some time to go. So first of all, we will attempt to handle the sorting orders. So we're going to make a new sprite renderer called the nightmare renderer. This is where all my nightmares are rendered. We're going to get that sprite renderer because we're going to need a reference to it. This is an easy money hack that I found on all of the 2D Reddits and such conversation posts of the internet, where you can actually use the Y position of your object in the world to automatically Z-sort it. Great! You can just automate this whole part of the process. Unfortunately, the other part of this method is to reduce your naive optimism by the time you spend trying to do this. Following this, we're going to fight with the pixel perfect camera. We're going to try to do some scaling stuff, and we're going to essentially throw a wire lines flickering error as we slowly start to discover what intra-pixel fighting is. Obviously, back in update, we saw that we're going to give up and switch to 3D at some point. So given our naive optimism dropping as time passes, we will eventually give up and switch to 3D. We always guard clause, so, if we've already pivoted, let's not pivot again. We're going to scrap our project and rebuild it in 3D, print that straight to the console. Is two-dimensional, is now false. We're going to delete all our sprites, add a cube, add a rigid body, and we will be done. We're going to do that by creating a primitive. Can't create a game object without giving it a name for the hierarchy. This particular cube, my salvation. Oh, look at the cube. Look at its physics. I really do love Z buffers. 2D to 3D is only one extra D, so it should be a quick transfer from what I've learned not to do in 2D to hopefully having a bit of better luck in 3D. Let's roll the next ones. Welcome to Tetro Runner 3D. This is a ground-up rebuild of the end of 2D back into 3D. This is around the point where it hit feature parity. So everything that was in 2D is now here in 3D. Let's have a look. Oh yeah. I keep reaching for buttons that don't exist yet in this build, but that I know exist later. We can see some portals up there, so starting to stretch the tool set. I can actually start to feel as well. I can start to feel the start of what became the character controller. The jump here feels very, very similar, although, yeah, not quite as capable at this point. We've got a little void. Void zone? Is that what that was? Or was that an early implementation of a snake? That might have been an early implementation of a snake. Took a portal. Oh yeah, look at that. A bit of corruption chasing us. Yeah, this is quite a special build. I remember getting to this point and just being so happy with how quickly I'd been able to get here as compared to the same journey that I'd taken in 2D. I just am so much more proficient at the 3D engine than I am the 2D engine. I have a much better understanding of how this one works. So really happy with this build. Maybe we'll just let this void zone touch us. Yes, this is some, we'll see more of this later. 3D feels great. Super happy. We need more. The environment is a little too scarce. I need more points of interest. I need more to interact with. More. There's not enough to do with the player character. We can refine that into the player controller is not dynamic enough. This becomes our problem. We enter a design loop where we attempt to come up with a bunch of solutions to this problem. We vet those solutions according to some framework or some criteria. We do a little design loop, obviously massively simplified here. There is a point we're getting to. We select air dash. We implement the air dash technically. We write some code and we maybe come up with a small graphic for it. We now have our player air dashing and we play test it. The air dash feels great. And the air dash specifically addressed the problem of the player controller not feeling dynamic enough. Tick. We do this with lots of different problems. We do this while we need more enemies. We do this while we need to reduce the load on early on in the experience, and we come out with these solutions to these problems where we now have all these mechanics, all of these big green ticks that are verifying that problems have been solved, which is great. Unfortunately, this is naive and didn't work very well at all. Whilst it did solve micro problems, it didn't develop a sense of world. It didn't develop an environment. The quality of the relationships between our mechanics was low. What it really felt like is it felt like having a bag full of mechanics more than it felt like a game. There was no cohesion. The relationships were not right. I'm a big frameworks guy. I'm a big systems guy. So have a look at this. Here we identify that the player controller is not dynamic enough. That's our problem. We design, we come out with the same thing, we implement it, we play test it. We come out with this mechanic. We go, yes, this mechanic is good, but we are going to add a small loop at the end, which is called an integration piece. This integration piece sends us back to the design process and necessitates a re-examination of how does our new mechanic fit with the other mechanics. What does this new mechanic do to our other mechanics? For example, our air dash. If we take the air dash and we decide air dash is a good mechanic, in order to integrate it with the rest of our mechanics, what we might think about is, let's say we have a snake. What happens if I air dash through a snake? Does that kill the snake? Does that kill the player? Do you just teleport through? Is that then additional tech that the player has to skip through a snake by air dashing? These are the kinds of little relationships between the mechanics that I learned would start to build a world versus a bag of mechanics, which is what I had up until that point. And there's actually a really good Carl Sagan quote that I've come to integrate into my own thinking, which is, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. And this was said at a TV show, I believe, in the early 80s. And it talks about this principle that, right, so I have an apple pie. I'd love to take that for granted, but I can't because I'm an overthinker. So if I have an apple pie, I must have an apple pie crust. That crust needs flour. To have flour, I need to have a mill. To have a mill, I must have grown some wheat, etc., etc. It's the premise that no one thing can exist without this network of relationships with other things. And in game design, that is what makes your game feel like a world versus a bag of clever mechanics. It is the quality of the relationships between your mechanics. Which all begs the question that if I were to continue to do this and to iterate and to play, what does Tetro Runner look like now? Let's roll one last clip. Here's the launch. This is where it is at. Mouse disappears. Welcome to the new menu. This is where it has all gotten to. Little co-op. You can have a second person jump in if we enable that. One controls the bricks, one controls the player. Have these handy dandy tutorial videos. Customization, some little hats that you can unlock, which is little bit of fun. All little hats do something. Obviously customize the colour of your boy as well. Some run modifiers. So this is kind of the end game system where modifiers can change the way that things work in the environment, mostly the blocks, but also some of the entities, and just switches up some of the rules of the world for some good replayability. Achievement system. Standard kind of achievements you'd expect to see. A swathe of graphical and otherwise settings. All what you would expect to see, really, but what we're here for is the game. Being first times through, it's going to try to tutorialize some stuff. We'll just ignore that. Oh yeah. Feels good. Just laser beam myself immediately. Score screen, let's call ourselves Baff. So just get a little bit further and we can actually, let's just, what are we doing? Let's turn it up a little bit. We can see some of the other game elements, as it were. Screwed along the bottom here so we can see what the void zones have become. It's growing along the bottom of the screen. We can see a snake in the north. I cannot play this and talk at the same time. I do not have the intellect required. Oi, we'll zip through there. Lightning strike into a portal. A little bit more dynamic than the early builds were. We'll just get some line clears in here because the speed of the wall is getting away from us just a little bit. Nice. Oh, whoop. There's our 200-meter announcement. Puts us about 10% of the way to the world record. Which is about 2,000 meters, maths checks out. We can kill that snake if we miss our opportunity to do so, never mind. Ah, no snake got me. As you can see, that is the look and feel of Tetro and where it's ended up. Really happy with it. It feels whole, it feels complete, and I along with it. That has been Tetro Runner, a post-mortem. I really hope you enjoyed that. Obviously there is so much more that I would like to say, but trying to keep this within a time budget. Thank you so much for coming along. I'm really excited for the next steps of the project and can't wait to take those, and that all just means I can finish this project and start another one. Thank you for listening.